Get out. I never want to see you again. Brandon, please don't do this. Get out. Get out of my house right now. Brandon's voice echoed through the marble hallway as he grabbed my suitcase and hurled it down the front steps. I stood there in the doorway, trembling, watching my clothes scatter across the driveway in the pouring rain. His mother stood behind him with her arms crossed, smiling. His sister was recording it on her phone, laughing. 3 days? It had been just 3 days since he'd signed that $33 million deal. The deal I'd helped him get. The deal that was supposed to save us. But here I was being thrown out like garbage while his new girlfriend watched from the living room window. What Brandon didn't know, what none of them knew, was that in 72 hours he'd be staring at a signature on that contract and his entire world would collapse. This is a story about betrayal, family cruelty, and the sweetest revenge you'll ever hear. Trust me, you need to watch every second of this because the twist at the end, chef's kiss. Smash that like button right now and let's dive in. My name is Maya, and if you'd asked me 12 years ago if I'd ever let someone treat me the way Brandon and his family did, I would have laughed in your face. I was a marketing executive at a top firm in the city. I had my own apartment, my own car, my own life. I was the girl who had it all figured out. Then I met Brandon at a coffee shop, and he had this smile that made me feel like I was the only person in the world. He told me about his dreams, his startup ideas, how he was going to change the tech industry. I fell hard. We all make mistakes. When we're in love, right? 6 months later, we got married. That's when I met his family. His mother, Diane, was a tall woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue. From the moment I walked into their house for the first family dinner, she looked at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of her shoe. Brandon's sister, Christine, was worse. She was 25, still living at home, and treated her brother like he was some kind of god. They both made it very clear that I wasn't good enough for their precious Brandon, but I loved him. So I smiled through the passive-aggressive comments. I nodded when Diane told me that my cooking wasn't as good as hers. I laughed when Christine made jokes about my clothes being budget-friendly. Brandon would squeeze my hand under the table and whisper, "Don't worry about them. They'll warm up to you." They never did. The first startup failed within 8 months. Brandon came home devastated and I held him while he cried. "It's okay," I told him. "We'll figure it out together," and we did. I picked up extra freelance work. I dipped into my savings. When that ran out, I got a second job waitressing on weekends. My parents lent us money, $20,000 from their retirement fund. Brandon promised we'd pay them back as soon as the next venture took off. But the next venture failed, too. And the one after that, 5 businesses in 8 years, and every single one crashed and burned. Each time I was there to catch him, each time I sacrificed a little more. I gave up my marketing career because Brandon said he needed me to focus on supporting him full-time. I maxed out 3 credit cards in my name because his credit was already ruined. I borrowed money from everyone I knew, including my Aunt Catherine, who I hadn't spoken to in years because of some old family drama. And through it all, Brandon's family treated me like their personal servant. We'd moved into their house after the 3rd business failed because we couldn't afford rent anymore. Diane made sure I knew I was a burden. Every morning, I woke up at 5 o'clock to make breakfast for everyone. Diane would criticize the eggs. Too runny, too hard, not enough salt, too much salt. Christine would throw her dirty clothes at me and say, "These need to be ironed for tonight. Don't mess them up like last time." Brandon would sit there eating his breakfast, scrolling through his phone, saying nothing. I worked the night shift. At a warehouse, came home at 3 o'clock in the morning, slept for 2 hours, then started the whole cycle again. I was exhausted all the time. My hair started falling out. I lost so much weight that my clothes hung off me, but I kept telling myself it would all be worth it when Brandon finally succeeded. When he made it big, everything would change. He'd stand up for me. We'd get our own place. We'd start a family. I just had to hold on a little longer. Then came the pregnancy test. 2 pink lines. I stared at it in the bathroom, my hands shaking, and for the first time in years, I felt pure joy. A baby. Our baby. Maybe this was the fresh start we needed. I told Brandon that night, pulling him aside after dinner. I expected him to be happy or at least surprised. Instead, he looked annoyed. "Maya, we can't afford a baby right now," he said, running his hand through his hair. "My business needs to succeed first. Can you just wait?" Wait. How do wait on a pregnancy? But I didn't argue. I never argued with Brandon. 3 weeks later, I had a miscarriage. I was at work when the cramping started. I drove myself to the hospital, called Brandon from the emergency room. He didn't answer. I left a voicemail, my voice breaking as I said, I lost the baby. He texted back 2 hours later, "Sorry, in a meeting, home late tonight." When he finally came home at midnight, he gave me an awkward hug and said, "It's probably for the best." We weren't ready anyway. Diane heard about it the next morning and said, "Well, at least you won't have to worry about ruining your figure now." Christine laughed. That was 2 years ago. I should have left then. I know that now, but I didn't because I still believed in Brandon. I still believed in us. Then 8 months ago, Brandon came to me with a new pitch, another tech startup, but this one was different. He swore this one would work. He just needed a major investor, someone with real money. He'd exhausted every contact he had. Every door had been slammed in his face. He was desperate. That's when I thought of Aunt Catherine. Catherine was my mother's older sister, a brilliant woman who'd made a fortune in venture capital. She and my mother had a falling out years ago over something I never fully understood. Family drama, inheritance issues, the usual stuff that tears families apart. We hadn't spoken to Catherine in over a decade, but I was desperate too. So, I called her. Sheen's word on the third ring. Maya. Her voice was cautious but not unkind. We talked for 20 minutes. I told her about Brandon's new startup, about how brilliant his ideas were, about how he just needed one real chance. She was quiet for a long moment, then said, "Let me meet you for coffee. Just you and me, tomorrow." We met at a small cafe across town. I hadn't seen Catherine in years, and she looked exactly the same, elegant, put together, with eyes that seemed to see right through you. She ordered us both coffee, then leaned forward and said, "Tell me everything, Maya. I mean everything." So I did. I told her about the failed businesses, about working 2 jobs, about living with Brandon's family. I tried to keep my voice steady, tried to sound strong, but when she asked, "Are you happy?" I broke down. Right there in that cafe, I cried like I hadn't cried in years. Catherine reached across the table and took my hand. That's when she noticed. The bruises on my wrists, they weren't from Brandon hitting me. He never did that. They were from carrying heavy boxes at the warehouse, from scrubbing floors on my hands and knees, from a body that was worked to the bone. "Maya," she said quietly, "when was the last time someone took care of you?" I couldn't answer. I couldn't even remember. She agreed to look at Brandon's pitch. 2 weeks later, she invited Brandon and his family to her office. I wasn't included in the meeting. Diane said it would be more professional without me there. So I waited at home cleaning the kitchen, praying this would work. When they came back, Brandon was glowing. "She said yes," he shouted, picking me up and spinning me around. $33 million, Maya. We're rich. We made it. His family was celebrating, popping champagne, hugging each other. I stood in the corner of the room, smiling, feeling this overwhelming sense of relief. Finally, it was all worth it. The contracts were drawn up within a week. Catherine's lawyers were thorough. There were stacks and stacks of papers. Brandon barely glanced at them. He was too excited, too eager to sign and get his money. Just standard legal stuff, the lawyer sighed. Brandon signed every page, initialing here, dating there. His signature getting sloppier with each document because his hand was cramping. Diane and Christine watched, grinning like they'd won the lottery. In a way, they thought they had. The money hit Brandon's account the next day, $33 million. I watched him check his phone, his eyes going wide, his hands shaking. "It's real," he whispered. "It's actually real." That night, the family threw a party. Champagne, expensive takeout, music blasting through the house. I tried to join them in the living room, but Christine waved me away. "We're celebrating. Go clean. Up the kitchen or something?" I did. I stood at the sink washing dishes, listening to them laugh and toast to Brandon's success, our success. Except I wasn't invited to be part of it. The next morning, Brandon was different, cold, distant. He wouldn't look at me during breakfast. When I asked if he wanted to go look at apartments, our own place, finally, he just shrugged and said, "I'm busy today." He left the house in a new suit I didn't know he'd bought. Diane and Christine exchanged looks across the table. Something was wrong. I could feel it. That afternoon, a woman showed up at the house. She was young, pretty, dressed in expensive clothes. Diane Mother M like she'd been expecting her. "Maya," Diane called out. "Come meet Natalie. She's Brandon's business partner." I came down the stairs, wiping my hands on my apron, and froze. Natalie was sitting in the living room in my spot on the couch, sipping tea that Diane had made for her. Diane never made tea for anyone. "Hi," Natalie said, smiling at me. "You must be Maya. I've heard so much about you." The way she said it made my skin crawl. Christina was there too, sitting next to Natalie, giggling about something. They all looked so comfortable together, so familiar. "How long have you known Brandon?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Natalie glanced at Christine, then back at me. "About 2 years now. We met at one of Christine's parties." 2 years. Brandon and I had been together for 12 years, married for 10, and this woman had been in his life for 2 of them, and his family knew. They all knew. That night, Brandon came home late. I was sitting in our bedroom. Well, it wasn't really our bedroom anymore since he'd started sleeping in the guest room 3 months ago, claiming he needed space to focus on work. I confronted him. "Who's Natalie?" He didn't even have the decency to look guilty. "She's my girlfriend," he said flatly. "We've been together for a while now." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "Your girlfriend, Brandon? We're married?" He shrugged. "Not for much longer." The next day, he called me into the living room. The whole family was there, sitting on the couches like some kind of tribunal. Diane, Christine, Natalie, and Brandon. There were papers on the coffee table. Divorce papers. "I'm upgrading my life, Maya," Brandon said, his voice matter of fact. Like he was discussing the weather. "You don't fit anymore." "You never really did," Diane nodded approvingly. "You were always just a placeholder, dear." "Surely you knew that." Christine leaned forward, grinning. "Did you honestly think you were good enough for my brother? Look at you. You're pathetic." They were all staring at me, waiting for me to cry, to beg, to fall apart. I couldn't breathe. 12 years. 12 years of sacrifice, of love, of giving everything I had. And this was how it ended. "You have 24 hours, Brandon continued. "Pack your things. Take only what you brought into this marriage. Everything else stays here." I tried to speak. Tried to find words, but my throat was closed. But I paid for everything, I finally whispered. Brandon laughed, actually laughed. Prove it. Everything's in my name. The house, the cars, the accounts. You have nothing, Maya. You are nothing. That's when Natalie stood up, walked over to Brandon, and kissed him right in front of me. Diane and Christine applauded. I stumbled out of the room, my vision blurring with tears. I went upstairs and started packing, one suitcase. That's all I could take. 12 years of my life fit into one suitcase. I found photos hidden in Brandon's drawer, pictures of him and Natalie at family gatherings, holiday parties, events I was never invited to. They'd been parading their relationship in front of everyone while I worked myself to death to support him. At midnight, Brandon came upstairs. Time's up, he said. He grabbed my suitcase and dragged it down the stairs. I followed, mum broken. He opened the front door. It was pouring rain. Brandon, please, I started to say. Beth cut me off. Get out. Get out of my house right now. He threw my suitcase down the steps. My clothes exploded across the wet driveway. Diane and Christine appeared behind him, watching, smiling. Christine had her phone out recording. This is going to get so many views, she said, laughing. I stood in the rain, staring at the house I'd lived in for years, at the family I'd tried so hard to please, at the man I'd loved with everything I had. Then Brandon slammed the door. The lock clicked. I gathered what clothes I could carry left, the rest, and called my friend Jessica. She picked me up an hour later, found me sitting on the curb, soaked, shivering, destroyed. The next 3 weeks were the darkest of my life. I stayed in Jessica's spare room, barely eating, barely sleeping. Debt collectors started calling. All those credit cards I'd maxed out were in my name. Brandon wasn't answering any of my calls. My parents were heartbroken. My father cried when I told him I'd lost everything. Our retirement money, he said. Quietly, it's all gone, isn't it? I couldn't answer him. I thought about ending it all. I really did. I stood on Jessica's balcony one night, looking down at the street below, thinking how easy it would be to just step off, to make all the pain stop, but I didn't. Something kept me standing there. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was just the tiniest flicker of hope that somehow, someway things would get better. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Hello. My voice was from crying. Is this Maya? A woman's voice. Professional kind. My name is Jennifer Park. I'm an attorney with Westfield Capital Group. We need you to come to our office regarding Brandon's investment contract. My heart sank. Of course, they were probably suing me too, claiming I was somehow responsible for Brandon's debts. Am I in trouble? I asked. There was a pause. No, Maya. Just please come in tomorrow. 10 o'clock in the morning. It's important. I went. I didn't have anything left to lose. The office was in a skyscraper downtown, all glass and steel and expensive furniture. Jennifer met me in the lobby, led me to a conference room, and that's when I saw her, Aunt Catherine. She was sitting at the head of the table, looking exactly as composed as she had at our coffee meeting. Maya, she said, standing up to hug. Me. I started crying immediately. I'm so sorry, I sobbed into her shoulder. He wasted your money, and it's all my fault, and I don't know how I'll ever repay you. Sit down, sweetheart, Catherine said gently, guiding me to a chair. Jennifer pulled out a thick folder and opened it. Mia, we need to explain something to you. About the investment contract your husband signed. She slid a paper across the table. It was the signature page from Brandon's deal. I saw his signature, messy and excited, and above it, the investor's name, Catherine Morrison-Chun. I don't understand, I said, looking between them. Catherine leaned forward. Maya, I signed Brandon's deal. I gave him $33 million, but I added, some special terms to the contract, terms that Brandon was too greedy and too stupid to read. Jennifer flipped through the pages, pointing out highlighted sections. According to the contract, 40% of Brandon's company automatically belongs to the founding spouse contributor. That's you, Maya. We documented every financial contribution you made, every contact you provided, every hour you worked to support his business. I stared at the words, not comprehending. But that's not all, Catherine continued. There's a clause here that states, if Brandon divorces you within 10 years of signing this contract, your ownership share increases to 70%. Jennifer pulled out another document. And this clause here states that if Brandon is proven to have committed adultery, your share increases to 85%. She slid photographs across the table. Pictures of Brandon and Natalie, dated, time-stamped, documented. Catherine had known. She'd known everything. You own him, Maya, Catherine said quietly. Brandon just signed away his entire life to you, and he has no idea. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. But why? Why would you do this? Catherine's eyes softened. Because when you came to me that day in the coffee shop, I saw my younger self. I was married once, a long time ago, to a man who used me the same way Brandon used you. But I didn't have anyone to protect me. I lost everything. I swore that if I ever had the chance to save another woman from that fate, I would. So I investigated Brandon. I found the girlfriend, the family conspiracy, all of it, and I built you a safety net. She pulled out more documents. The house, the one Brandon had thrown me out of, was actually in my name. I'd signed the original. Mortgage years ago, back when Brandon's credit was too damaged to qualify. Catherine had made sure that was documented. The car's registered in my name. Every asset Brandon thought he owned was legally mine. He threw you out of your own house, Maya. Jennifer said he's been living in your car, spending your money, and he doesn't even know it. I sat there stunned as they explained everything. The contract was airtight. Brandon had signed it without reading a single clause, too eager to get his hands on the money. His own lawyers hadn't caught the provisions because Catherine's legal team was that good. In his greed and his cruelty, Brandon had given me everything. What do I do now? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Catherine smiled. Now we go. Pay Brandon a visit. 2 days later, I walked into Brandon's new office. He'd rented an entire floor at a luxury building downtown, all modern furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows. His assistant tried to stop me, but I pushed past her. Brandon was in a meeting with Natalie, Diane, and Christine. They were all dressed in expensive clothes, drinking expensive coffee, laughing about something. When they saw me, the laughter died. What are you doing here? Brandon demanded, standing up. Diane's face twisted with disgust. Security. Someone call security. But then Catherine walked in behind me, followed by Jennifer and 2 other attorneys. Brandon's face went pale. Wait, he recognized her, the investor. The woman who'd given him $33 million. What is this? He asked, his voice cracking. Jennifer opened her briefcase and pulled out the contract. Mr. Brandon, did you read the investment agreement you signed? Brandon's eyes darted around the room. Of course I read it. It's standard. Then you know that you just gave 85% of your company to your wife. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Christine spoke first. What? That's impossible. Jennifer calmly. Read the clauses aloud. Every single one. The founding spouse provision, the divorce clause, the adultery clause. With each sentence, Brandon's face got whiter. Diane grabbed the contract, her hand shaking, reading it herself. You idiot, she screamed at Brandon. You signed this? You didn't even read it? Natalie looked at Maya, then at Brandon, then at the door. So, wait, he doesn't actually have any money? Brandon tried to speak, tried to explain, but the words wouldn't come. Catherine stepped forward. The house Brandon threw you out of, that's Maya's house. The car he's been driving. Maya's car, the bank account he's been spending from. Maya set that up. Everything you think you own, Brandon, belongs to her. And thanks to your infidelity and your cruelty, she now owns 85% of your company too. Diane turned on Brandon, screaming. Christine was yelling. Natalie quietly picked up her purse and walked out. The family chaos was beautiful, but I didn't stay to watch. I looked at Brandon one last time. You have 24 hours to get out of my house. I said calmly, take only what you brought into this marriage, which if I remember correctly, was nothing. I turned and walked out, Catherine's arm around my shoulders. That was 6 months ago. I sold the company for $50 million, paid my parents back with interest, started my own venture capital firm that invests specifically in women-owned businesses. I bought a beautiful house in the hills, adopted a daughter named Sophie, and met someone new, a kind, gentle man who treats me like I'm precious. Brandon, last I heard, he's working at an electronics store, living in a studio apartment. Diane cleans houses now. Christine works at a call center and posts bitter rants on social media. They all blame each other for what happened. I ran into Brandon once at a grocery store. He was in the frozen food aisle, looking thin and tired. He saw me, and for a moment our eyes met. I thought he might apologize, might say something, anything. Instead, he just turned and walked away. Good. He should. Walk away. He should spend the rest of his life walking away from the life he threw away. Aunt Catherine was right. She didn't give me revenge. She gave me what was always mine. My worth, my value, my power. Brandon thought he was throwing out garbage. But what he really did was set me free. Sometimes the people who betray you give you the greatest gift, freedom. Brandon thought he was throwing away trash. Instead, he threw away the only person who ever truly loved him. And in his greed, he signed away his entire future without even knowing it. Karma isn't always instant, but when it comes, it's perfect. If this story hit you hard, slam that like button. Subscribe because I've got more stories that'll make you believe in justice. And comment below. What would you have done in Maya's place? Would you have taken the money or walked away? I'll see you in the next one. Remember, never underestimate the quiet ones. They might just own everything you think is yours.